Hello and thanks for joining us to our viewers here in Korea and around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, April 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned into our ongoing coverage of the Sewol ferry sinking, the worst maritime accident in Korea's recent history. We're now into the 8th day of search and rescue operations. Rescue teams are still putting all their efforts into finding any possible survivors, but hope is extremely dim given the time that's passed. The number of confirmed deaths also rose sharply overnight. For more details, let's go live to our Ji Myung-kil standing by at the Paengmok-hang harbour, just 20 kilometres away from the accident site. Myung-kil.
Good morning, Mark. Divers were successful in getting into the third floor of the vessel overnight, where many passengers were believed to be at the time of the accident. The death toll currently stands at 128. The third floor is where the lounges and cafeteria are, and the fourth floor is where the cabins are. And the rescue and search operations are continuing. It's believed many students were in the cafeteria on the third floor, as it was breakfast time when the accident occurred. There were cries of parents throughout the night, wailing and howling for the children after they received reports confirming that their child had died. More than 170 people remain unaccounted for, presumably trapped inside the sunken ferry. Of that total, nearly 90% are students from Tanon High School.
Now, Myung-kil, this is still officially a rescue mission. How are those operations going?
The rescue team is continuing their rescue and search operations throughout the night. Nearly 900 flares and powerful flashing lights from fishing boats were used to help divers operate in the dark. Throughout the night, divers continued their attempts to enter the vessel using the 5 guide ropes installed earlier to the ferry. The divers had a tough time fighting against the strong currents and the low visibility of the waters, as they are still limited to 20 minutes underwater using oxygen masks. Family representatives of missing passengers and 5 government agencies agreed to establish temporary mortuaries at this harbor for funeral services. This was Ji Myung-kil reporting from Paengmok-hang Harbor.
Let's move to the latest search strategy in locating the missing passengers from the Sewol ferry. Operations are focusing, like Myung-kil said, on the 3rd and 4th floors. This is where experts believe most of the bodies will be found. For details, let's turn to our Kim Hyun-bin, who's standing by at the Central Disaster and Safety Headquarters on Jindo Island. Hyun-bin.
Hey Mark, spokesperson here said Tuesday that search teams have recovered over 60 bodies from the 3rd and 4th floor of the vessel over the past 48 hours. Most of the victims retrieved over the past 2 days were high school students who were in the ferry's lounge when the vessel capsized. He added that many more unrecovered bodies are thought to be located in the cafeteria of the vessel, as it was breakfast time when the ferry started listing. That area is going to be the next place divers enter. The spokesperson admitted that they are facing some difficulties since divers need to knock down a wall, and even before that, they need to remove all the waste and debris that is blocking their access to the area. Another briefing is scheduled for later this morning with details on yesterday's search operations as well as today's schedule. I'll bring you those details in our later newscast. Until then, this has been Kim Hyun-bin reporting live at Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters in Jindo.
Now, hundreds of divers have been very heavily involved in the search and rescue operations, and the harsh conditions they face has been very well documented. Poor visibility, strong currents, and having to bring up the bodies of so many young students makes their work not only physically, but extremely emotionally draining. Park Ji-won reports.
A rescue diver from the Korean Navy Ship Salvage Unit goes into the water with hopes of finding survivors or the bodies of the fallen. Under the surface, their visibility is limited. Pitch black really, save for an area about 20 centimeters in front of the divers' faces. The situation worsens at night. Despite the help of flares and lighting from fishing boats, divers can barely see, relying instead on distance lines or guidelines. Those lead them inside the sunken ferry and then back to safety. There are hundreds of divers on the scene, but each guideline can only be shared by 2 divers. In the early hours of rescue operations, just 3 or 4 divers were able to get into the water because just 1 or 2 guidelines were set up. High waves and strong currents also hampered the rescue operations in the first 48 hours after the accident, which is so-called golden time for rescue operations. After numerous failed attempts, divers finally got inside the ferry on the 5th day of the tragic accident with the help of 5 guidelines that were set up. With tighter currents and waves coming this week, search operations have accelerated. However, divers are still at risk. They face the risk of decompression sickness, known as diver's disease, which took the life of a Navy diver who was participating in search and rescue efforts following the sinking of the warship Cheonan 4 years ago. Despite such risks, rescue divers continue to go into the water with faint hopes of finding a survivor, even though it's now been days since the ferry sank. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, unmanned underwater robots sent to help search efforts in Jindo have been rendered pretty much useless, unable to withstand the strong tidal currents at the accident site. But a domestically made robot that can crawl along the bottom of the sea floor is said to be deployed, and hopefully this will give rescue teams a better view of the situation. Son Jung-in reports.
This is a remote control robot crabster that can crawl along the bottom of seafloor. This 2.4-meter long, 2-meter high machine weighs 650 kilograms and moves using 6 legs. In the ocean, its weight reduces to 150 kilograms due to buoyancy, enabling it to explore the water with a maximum speed of 0.1 meter per second. Crabster is installed with a high-resolution scanning sonar, which helps it recognize objects that are within 100-meter distance. It can shoot and record its surrounding using an ultrasonic camera as well as 10 optical cameras, and can also collect samples using its long arms. Developed by the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology in 2010, the robot will take part in the ongoing search operation at the Sewol ferry disaster site. Crabster was made to be able to resist water currents that run up to 3.7 kilometers per hour.
Using scanning sonar, we can expect to receive more information on how the sunken ferry is capsized, so that we can figure out the best way to rescue and salvage the vessel.
Unmanned submersible robots, or ROVs, from Korea and the U.S. were dispatched to the accident site, but have so far failed to gather any substantial results as they were affected by the currents. Unlike ROVs, experts hope this crab-like robot, which is able to withstand powerful currents, can help inspect the site and play an active role in the search operation. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
As the death toll of the tragic Sewol ferry accident is on the rise, frustration grows as the families of the victims and the missing demand to know why the captain and some of the crew fled the ship and failed to follow their responsibilities to look after their passengers. The one man with some of the biggest questions to answer is, of course, the captain. Investigators are looking into charging him with murder by omission. For more on this, we go over to our Kwon So-ah at the news center. So-ah.
Good morning, Mark. As you probably remember, murderous was how President Park Geun-hye described the actions of the captain Lee Jun-seok and the crew members. And now investigators are examining whether the captain could be charged with homicide by omission, which can be pressed in the case of death caused by inaction by the defendant. The joint investigation of prosecutors and police, as well as the Justice Ministry, said on Tuesday they will inspect the legal principles. Captain Lee is currently charged with 5 offenses, which include negligence and violating ship crew law, which requires the crew to remain on the vessel until all passengers escape.
So, among the multiple factors that may have caused the accident, the operator of the Sewol ferry is also being probed extremely carefully, and it's under suspicion, I believe, of a number of illegal activities and actions.
Yes, the National Tax Service launched a special probe Tuesday into 4 firms that are closely related to the ferry's operator, Ji Marine Company. The special investigation team also imposed travel bans on 30 additional personnel related to the operator. The prosecution is also looking into whether the operator's management and the family which owns the company evaded taxes or embezzled funds by making illegal overseas transactions. The latest travel bans come after the president of the company, Kim Han-sik, and Yoo Byung-on, a former chairman of the company's parent firm, as well as his 2 sons, were banned from traveling this past Sunday. The 2 sons are the biggest shareholders of the operator's holding company, with former chairman Yoo said to be the practical owner of the firm. The Yoo family reportedly has more than $230 million worth of assets, that's excluding debt and assets kept outside of Korea. Reports say former chairman Yoo established 13 overseas corporate branches and used them to snowball the family's assets. Ji Marine Company has been in the investigators' sights ever since the accident happened last Wednesday. Now, I'll be back at 9 a.m. Korea time with more updates.
Thank you, Soa. When the Sewol ferry first ran into trouble, most of its passengers followed the instructions given to them by the ship's crew and stayed put inside the ship. This has confounded foreign maritime experts who say that decision and the indecisiveness on the part of the captain and the crew likely doomed hundreds on board. Yulian has the details.
Maritime experts describe the announcements on the Sewol ferry instructing people to stay in their rooms at the time of the accident as totally incomprehensible.
In 99.9% cases, the crew is on top of it. They are well trained and they are able to evacuate the ship in plenty of time.
The retired Commodore says it is unacceptable that the captain completely failed in his duties to take control during the crucial moments after the accident.
Key decisions should be made within the captain's mind within 5 to 10 minutes, as soon as he gets a report from all departments of the ship and assesses how much damage is done to the vessel itself.
Logs show that the captain of the Sewol ferry, Lee Jun-seok, delayed evacuation for at least 30 minutes after the ship began to capsize. Others say the announcement telling people to stay where they were actually made the situation worse. Mario Vitone, a former U.S. Coast Guard maritime accident investigator, says if those announcements were not made, the passengers would have gone to the deck to see what was going on. Thad Allen, the former head of the U.S. Coast Guard, also says common sense dictates that when a situation is deteriorating, the crew needs to give up on trying to save the ship and pour efforts into saving the passengers. Yurian, Arirang News.
This ferry disaster has raised some serious questions about safety awareness here in Korea. Authorities have vowed to punish those responsible for the accident to the full extent of the law. However, records show that in Korea, those who violate maritime regulations are often barely punished at all. Connie Lee has more.
Coast Guard officials flip over a boat after knocking on it in search of survivors. 7 crew members were found dead in this hit-and-run accident. This happened last year in March in the same waters where the Sewol ferry incident took place. And just about 2 weeks ago, authorities caught 6 crew members under the influence of alcohol, steering a boat in the waters around Korea. But even out of the sea waters, more trouble. Last month, authorities found 17 sailors steering ships with illegal licenses. In the past 5 years alone, here in Korea, about 600 people were found dead or missing from maritime accidents, most of them caused by human error. From 2009 to 2013, there were about 1,400 accidents at sea. And out of those, 82% were caused by the crew. Safety violations and negligence were the cause for most of the accidents. Regardless, in those cases, the penalties for the crew would be considered light by most. Most of them were let off with just a warning, while others were suspended from work. Not a single one of the crew members had their licenses revoked. Year after year, light punishments for the many accidents in Korean waters. And now, with Korea's biggest maritime accident in decades at the fore, questions are being raised about whether it's finally time to take sea safety more seriously. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now, as more and more bodies are brought to the surface at the accident site, a temporary group memorial altar has been set up to pay respect to the Danwon High School students who so tragically lost their lives in the ferry disaster. We now connect live to our Connie Kim, who is standing by the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall. Connie.
Hi, Mark. I'm currently at the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall, which is about 5 minutes away from Danwon High School. Now, it's pretty calm around here right now, but with the altar set to open in about 2.5 hours' time, we are definitely expecting streams of friends and families visiting here to say their last goodbyes. Now, the task force team of Gyeonggi Education Office has decided to set this temporary altar as it's difficult to arrange a group funeral for the deceased. As the families of the victims wish to hold the memorial altar, a memorial altar at the Hwarang Recreation Park will be set for all of those who have lost their lives next week. Now, meanwhile, 25 bodies are scheduled to be released this morning to their friends and families.
Connie, we hear that some of the students that survived the accident have been, or will shortly be anyway, discharged from hospital and are attempting to get back to their daily routine as much as they can, of course.
Right. About 80 to 90% of student survivors that have received medical treatment at Korea University Ansan Hospital will be discharged depending on their mental and physical status. Now, the director of the hospital said that them staying in the hospital too long could actually make the recovery process more difficult and stressful for the students. They will, of course, receive regular counseling sessions and, if needed, medication as well. Danwon High School, which was temporarily closed, will reopen Thursday for students that were not on board the Sewol ferry, while survivors still receiving treatment may take classes and counseling in the hospital. This has been Connie Kim reporting live from Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
1 week has now passed since the Sewol ferry sank, and the chance of finding any survivors at this point is extremely grim. But it hasn't stopped the outpouring of support from the public. In particular, an online movement has rallied behind a symbol of a yellow ribbon in order to keep hope alive that the missing may still be rescued. Paulie reports.
This simple image of a yellow ribbon bow has become a symbol of hope in the wake of one of Korea's deadliest maritime disasters. Its message of one small movement that can lead to big miracles has resonated with people across the nation. The Yellow Ribbon Campaign of Hope was first started by a university student club, urging people to unite in their support for those affected by the tragic accident.
It began as a logo being distributed as a KakaoTalk wallpaper, but it spread to other aspects of everyday life that we can see, like tying a yellow ribbon or string on your backpack. Keeping them in your thoughts is also good.
The Yellow Ribbon Campaign has spread online across social networking services such as KakaoTalk, Twitter, and Facebook, with international celebrities and professional athletes also joining in to express their support for the victims. Meanwhile, the story of Park Ji-young, a 22-year-old crew member, has deeply moved the country. According to survivors, Park had refused to take a life jacket and instead kept trying to save passengers till the very end. Her body was one of the first to be recovered from the wrecked ship. An online petition has now attracted tens of thousands of signatures, calling for the government to designate her as a martyr. Once legally recognized for her sacrifice, Park's family will receive financial compensation and benefits, while her body may be buried in the National Cemetery.
Certificates issued by hospital-level medical institutions or police records to prove our actions are most important. In addition, identification documents from fire departments and other authorities are also required.
The Health Ministry says once it receives a formal application for Park, officials will promptly examine her case for review. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
With President Obama arriving in Seoul this Friday, North Korea is showing signs of preparing for a fourth nuclear test. South Korean Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Min-seok said Tuesday that increased movement has been detected at the North's Punggye-ri nuclear test site. He added that Pyongyang is at a stage where it could carry out a nuclear test now at any time. South Korea and US forces are closely monitoring the situation, and the South's Defense Ministry and the Joint Chiefs of Staff have also set up a crisis management task force to prepare for a possible test. Experts have speculated recently that a fourth nuclear test could be in the works ahead of Obama's visit to Tokyo and Seoul this week. Also, on the eve of US President Obama's trip to Japan, a group of nearly 150 Japanese lawmakers paid their respects at the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine, where convicted war criminals are laid. The visit by a group of legislators from several parties and at least one cabinet minister to mark an annual spring festival drew strong rebuke from Korea, a country touched so harshly under Japanese colonial rule in the early 20th century. Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jo Tae-young described the visit as deplorable and an act that undermines stability in the region. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said earlier that the visits were an individual matter of personal religious freedom and not something the government should interfere with.
I'm Ji Myung-kil with a check on the weather conditions this Wednesday in Jindo. The conditions are improving over in Jindo. Winds should be calmer than yesterday, and waves will be milder, with reaching no higher than 0.5 meters. And underwater visibility should greatly improve when the current flows are at their slowest. One is coming up at 9:13 a.m. and next will be 3:30 and another at 8:35 p.m. The speed of flow should decrease 1 hour before and 1 after these indicated time. And since we are seeing nip tides from yesterday, which will last till Thursday, it's expected that the search and rescue operations over at the site could take place all day long today. And temperatures should rise higher than yesterday, rising to 22 degrees Celsius with lots of sunshine around at Jindo. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 9.
And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about 30 minutes' time, and our news team will be continuing with our comprehensive coverage on the Sewol ferry disaster and the ongoing search and rescue efforts throughout the day. Goodbye.